Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 363. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise awareness of trauma and to help support and inspire new trauma workers through this podcast and my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. Thanks so much for joining me today, and here we go. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I'm very excited today to have my guest, Bree Bonchay. Bree, hello again.
Hi, Guy.
All right. So Bree is a licensed psychotherapist with 2 decades of experience working in the field of mental health and trauma recovery. She specializes in helping people recover from toxic relationships, and she shares her insights about narcissistic personality disorder and psychopathy in her blog, FreeFromToxic. Bree's articles have been featured in major online magazines. She's appeared on radio as a guest expert. She's also a dedicated advocate. In 2016, she founded World Narcissistic Abuse Awareness Day, which is celebrated every 1st of June. Bree, welcome. Share with our listeners where you're from and where you're calling from, and then let's dive in.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to say first, Guy, that, thank you for having me on. I love the work that you're doing, and I'm just really honored to be here. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that, and you're very welcome.
So I was born and raised in California in the San Fernando Valley, which is about 20 minutes north of LA. And I currently live in Santa Clarita, which is a little bit north of the valley, and I've been living here for about 20 years.
Wow. And
a lot of people don't know where it is, but once I tell them it's where Magic Mountain is, and they, I know where that is.
Right. Awesome. All right, so let's start out with a quote, a mantra, a sentence, whatever you have. I want to get the ball rolling here, and this is really oftentimes a way to kind of set the context of what's to come. What do you have for us?
Okay, so when I think about psychotherapy and treating people who have suffered some trauma, the quote that comes to mind, and it's sort of like a motto, personal motto of mine, is a quote from Viktor Frankl. And the quote is, "In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning."
Man, I love that one. So say that again, and then let's unpack that.
Okay, so it says, "In some ways, suffering ceases to be meaning. Suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning." Okay.
And why that quote? When did that become resonant for you, Bree?
Well, personally, when I think of the trauma that I've experienced personally, and with working with my clients and seeing them trying to recover from trauma, this quote just seems so true, because it's, to me, when you can figure out what it is that makes you important, what it is that gives your life meaning, or if you can find some meaning within your suffering, then that gives you the motivation and the drive to carry on and the strength to heal. And so I kind of find that, as my role as a therapist is to really help people discover or figure out what their why is. And that can be really hard, especially when you're going through trauma and you're suffering and you're in pain and you have rage or you have grief. It can be extra hard to find what that is. But I really see that the people who do have some kind of why or purpose or aim or goal in their lives do fare better.
Yeah. I was just thinking, that's such a heavy, such a heavy statement. To find meaning in your suffering, in your trauma. I mean, for me, how hard that is to do that. And I can just imagine, if you're a new client, maybe just embarking on your own healing journey, and the idea of finding meaning. What are you,
right.
Nuts? I remember it reminded me when I was living in Los Angeles and I was working in a restaurant there, and I just shot back to this time. I was working with this guy. He was a really coolest guy, and I remember he came into work one day and he was like really just so down and despondent. And I was like, dude, what is up? He said, one of my friends passed away. And he said, he went on to tell the story about how a number of his friends had passed away from AIDS. And I said, how do you deal with that? And he said, you have to find meaning in it. It's, he said, I'm not like religious, but I am spiritual and I have my own spiritual thing. And I never forgot that. It's like, you have to find meaning in it. Otherwise, he said, you're going to go nuts.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you said that, because it's not something that you would do in the initial stages of working with a client. When they come to you, it's not something that I would bring up or try to do. Of course, there's other more important work to be done. But I think at some point when it's right as a therapist, when your client is stabilized and secure, that this has to come up, because it's not like to just want an end to your suffering isn't really going to be enough for a lot of people to wake up every day and carry on. That there has to be something more. There has to be something that's even stronger than that to get us through a lot of the suffering that we go through. And the personal tragedies that we experience, it has to be more than I just don't want to suffer anymore. It has to. So, and I think that's where finding some meaning can really help. And I know that personally, I've experienced like 3 really significant traumas throughout my life, and it wasn't the modality. What got me through, I should say, isn't what modality, a specific modality or intervention or anything other than I had to find my why, my meaning, some sort of something from each one that made me want to wake up in the morning.
Well, let's kind of use that to transition, and I kind of want to invite you, Bree, to share, the story of how you got here. I mean, how is it that we're talking today about this, this crazy? I mean, trauma is just so crazy. It's just so, I don't know what the word is, intense and serious and awful, really. But how did you get here such that you're working on this, that you're doing this work?
Yeah, it was by accident. I completely fell into working. Interesting. I just thought of it. What got me into psychotherapy? I was held up at gunpoint. I'll tell this story really quickly, but I was in college and I was just like, I don't know, messing around. I was taking courses. I wasn't really serious. I didn't know what I really wanted to do, and I was held up at gunpoint.
Oh my God.
And this was my first traumatic experience. And I truly felt that I was going to die that night, and I didn't. And after it happened, I moved out of my apartment. I was like glued to my parents' couch. I had horrible PTSD. Every time, broad daylight, somebody would come around a corner, I would like jump. I mean, really severe PTSD. Nightmares. And at some point I thought to myself, just kind of when I was processing it all, and it didn't happen overnight, it took a while, that wow, I could have died that night, and here I am just really not doing much with my life. I'm not going anywhere fast. And so that's when I decided, I got to make some changes, and so what got me off my parents' couch and serious, and I started, taking more classes, getting straight A's, and really moving ahead with my life, and it, pointed me in the direction to help others, was that experience, and it kind of exactly what I was talking about finding something meaningful within that experience that motivated me to get through the hell of PTSD and trying to process it all.
So what was that thing that you found? I mean, what was it that gave you meaning?
Was basically that life is short.
Yeah.
I'm wasting time. Life is precious. I need to make something of my life. I need to do something with my life because it can be taken from me at any time. So like maybe a new perspective, Yeah.
So what happened after that? What were your next steps?
So I worked in this field. I graduated. Well, I should say I graduated. I applied to graduate school, and I got my master's in social work, and I worked as a psychotherapist for many years. And then I worked in a variety of different settings. I worked in psych. I worked in outpatient. I worked in hospitals. So I worked in a variety of settings over the years. And my third trauma, which was I was in a relationship with a malignant narcissist. And so here I was, a pretty seasoned psychotherapist, thinking that, this would never happen to me. And it did. And that is the trauma that sort of pushed me in the direction of doing the work that I'm doing now, which is specializing with people who have been in pathological relationships with individuals who have narcissistic personality disorder, and antisocial personality disorder, and even psychopathy.
Now, I mean, if you could, what does that look like? I mean, being in a relationship with someone who has narcissistic personality disorder, for those of us who don't know, what would that look like?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, because it will look very different than what most of us were taught in grad school. I know that when I was in grad school, I maybe got a couple hours of personality disorder training. And the training I got was really what the DSM says, which are the more overt signs of narcissistic personality disorder, for instance. And the thing is that most narcissists or antisocial personality disordered individuals, they don't present like that. If they did, none of us would give them the time of day. If they were entitled and if they were exploitative and selfish, we would all just run from them. So how does it look like when you're in a relationship? It looks really wonderful in the beginning. It's almost everything that you hoped for in a relationship. And, and in a lot of these relationships, and I think what's so difficult is there's not necessarily any verbal abuse or any physical abuse. So it's really hard to point to something specific and put the finger on what's going on. But personally, and with so many survivors that I speak with, all you know is that you're depressed, that you're anxious, that it doesn't matter what you do, you just kind of feel like nothing you do is ever good enough. And anything happens is kind of always your fault somehow, and you kind of walk on eggshells because you don't know if a knife in the sink or, something really minor is going to cause an argument. Mm-hmm. So or anything, you could say anything. You could say the sky is blue and that could cause an argument. You just don't know. And so you begin to censor yourself, and you begin to just feel really confused. And and hopeless in a lot of cases. And so, so that's kind of what it looks like when you're in one of these relationships, and just really it causes a lot of self-doubt, and your sense of reality sort of eroded away. So then you don't trust yourself. You don't trust your own judgment.
Oh my God. Sounds like quicksand almost, like, not realizing you're going down and down and down, but soon you find yourself like you can't move.
Yeah, and it's like one of those things that it's so gradual that you don't notice that you're slipping. You don't notice the decline when things happen so gradually. And so that's kind of part of the problem. And for me, when I was in that relationship, I never had experienced anything like that. And I knew something was wrong, but because there was nothing I could point to, I didn't really put it together till the end, because what tends to happen in these relationships is over time, then you do start to see a little bit, more of the overt type of traits and behaviors, and they become a little bit more obvious. And so I did finally put it together. And when I did, and the relationship ended, I realized a few things. I realized, one, like I really couldn't talk to anybody about it because I was embarrassed. Mm-hmm. Because if this happened to me and I didn't see it, then what does that say about me as a therapist? Right? So I really had a lot of shame, and I was embarrassed, and I couldn't really talk about it, or I felt I couldn't talk about it. And I also, at the same time, though, I had PTSD, and I knew from my two other experiences what that was like, and so I noticed it right away, and I was having flashbacks, and that was my primary symptom with that. But it was having a lot of flashbacks and just a lot of anger and mood dysregulation, and I just thought that this is nothing that I ever learned in school. And it kind of felt mad that why wasn't this taught to me in school? How could I go all these years and just never hear of this type of thing? And so I decided to write about it. And I started blogging, partly because it was cathartic, and I needed to sort of talk about the things that I was sort of putting together and piecing together and figuring out. And the other part of me really wanted to warn people who've never even heard about NPD, because I figured, like, I'm a therapist, and if I knew about NPD,
right,
what about these other people, like, have no clue? So I kind of, did it for those reasons, and didn't think anybody would ever read what I was writing. But every month I would get more readers and more readers and more readers.
When did you start that, Bree?
I think this was like, I want to say around 5 years ago.
Okay. And when did how long was that relationship you were in?
It wasn't really long, and it was only about 18 months.
Okay.
So Guy, like, I had PTSD from this relationship, and I had physical, as with PTSD, and when you're censoring yourselves and you're under chronic stress and you're walking on eggshells, and anybody who works with people knows that is very stressful on your physical body. Right. And I was having physical ailments just in 18 months, and I was never called a name. And that's kind of what I want to stress. That's why it's so hard to detect. I was never called a name. There was no verbal abuse, physical abuse, name calling. That was just not even there. It was really insidious. It was a lot of, like, browbeating wrapped in, I just care for you, and I just want the best for you, and I just want to show you a better way to boil water because, so, but and so you don't notice it, because that, one instance of that is not abuse.
Right.
You know, it's a very cumulative feeling. But when I started the blog, what I started to realize is that my readers were so happy that there was it's a therapist that got it. Because still now, but even more so 5 years ago, there aren't really many I mean, that's the problem. You know, we have inadequate training.
Oh, how did you find out what it was?
Oh, yeah, that's well, I started doing my own research, and I found out about it from online, from just the way so many other people find out about it, and that's Googling. But because this isn't a recognized specialty, because there isn't you know, any model of treatment, the information that's being circulated is you know, from some mental health professionals, but a lot of it is survivors. So you started writing about it, people started reading it, and what happened next? Well, and that's how I kind of got into doing this work and working with survivors, is that when they realize, like, wow, you're a therapist, and I wasn't writing from the first person, I was writing as a therapist, but they were just so happy that, like, oh, wow, you get it, because so many of them are going to therapists who were not getting it, who were misdiagnosing them, and in some cases, re-traumatizing them. And so they were commenting not only that I got it, but that I wrote about it as if I had experienced it too. Like, you write about it like only somebody who has actually experienced it could. So I started being honest and saying, well, I did experience it. And that was a big thing for me, because I thought it was a negative, but but to my readers, it was actually really a positive. And so when they found that out, they really wanted to, the people were asking me to work with them. And that's how I got in, you know, that's how I started this work. And I recognized that there was a very big need for not only public education, but better training for mental health professionals. And it just sort of went from there. Yeah, what an amazing story, Bree, and thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, that is definitely intense. I mean, you've gone through so much, and I just so appreciate you putting yourself out there. And, you know, it is so powerful when, you know, like you said, you know, you weren't initially writing in the first person, but then you did share it, and that's, people responded to that. And I just want to say that I so appreciate you, you know, putting yourself out there on this podcast. I really appreciate that, because people are listening, and it's having an impact. It's impacting me, and I know it's impacting other people too. You know, as you're writing, as you were talking about what you experienced in that relationship, you know, as someone who's familiar with the DSM, you know, you're like trying to hang your coat on a particular symptom or quality of that disorder. It's very difficult. Well, okay, it's not fitting in that. It's not fitting in that. It's not. Where is it fitting? So I can see how people, their clinicians can be like, "What is this? What are you talking about?" But exactly. Yeah. But and the PTSD presents kind of atypically as well. So that throws a lot of clinicians off. Let's talk about you know, maybe a little bit of an early clinical error. What was it like for you to work with people who have experienced this? Yeah, you know, errors, still working on sort of, since it's new and there is no established model of care. I mean, Sandra Brown has started an association, and I'm part of that, and we're developing a model of care so that we can train clinicians to treat people who have survived these relationships, because there's a need. There's such a big need for clinicians who are interested in doing this type of work. But so yes, mistakes, kind of just, using our intuition to kind of just feel through it, in the absence of any kind of framework. But one thing that I didn't do when I started working with survivors that I definitely do now, and I find so useful and helpful, is using measurements. I'm not a math person. I tend to shy away with anything that you have to score or measurements or anything. But I find it so helpful because, even if you give a measurement at the first session and then maybe the fourth, the eighth, or whatever interval you'd like, especially when you work with people who have PTSD, and the recovery is not linear. There's progress that's a couple steps ahead and then a couple steps back, and then a really common thing with people with PTSD too is they tend to have really catastrophic thinking, real all or nothing, and so they may be making progress, but they can't see it because it's gradual and it's not linear, and then they can't really detect it, and then they'll have maybe one a flashback that maybe they didn't, a really bad one, or they'll have one they haven't had some, in a while, and then they'll have one, and to them that's evidence that they're just not getting better. And you see, Bree, I'm never going to get better. There's no hope for me. So it's really great when you can pull out these measurements, if you can give them a little. There's that PDS-5, this little 24 question, and go, look, you took this in the beginning, and now you took it on the fourth session. In this session, look at your scores. You have improved on this measure, and it's not only good for me to sort of evaluate my effectiveness and what's working with this group because there's no framework, but it's also really good to use as a therapeutic tool.
Yeah, I really like that you mentioned that. It just kind of really engages the prefrontal cortex, right? It kind of solidifies what's going on for someone who could be living in a reality where they don't know what's going on, right? They're feeling very symptomatic. Nothing seems to be solid, yet these measures are very much solid in the moment and kind of proof. This is what's going on. You did make an improvement,
Right.
I think that can be very powerful.
Yes, I find it to be. Yeah.
So you created this Awareness Day, WNAAD, World Narcissistic Abuse Awareness Day. When did that happen?
Okay, so I was okay. That started because in the past 5 years, the internet has exploded with information about narcissistic abuse, this kind of abuse, and it's growing daily. There is so much information, and I just thought, what can I do? I want to make a change, and I want to make difference, and I want to help raise awareness about this, but there's already tons of articles out there. It just didn't seem like there was a need for me to keep writing and just sort of being redundant and reinventing the wheel. So I decided, maybe if I can get people together and really sort of make some noise, we can raise some awareness and hopefully, educate the public, so that they can arm themselves with knowledge and protect themselves, and also hopefully, get them trained mental health professionals so that they can identify and treat these folks. So that was what really inspired me to create World Narcissistic Abuse Awareness Day.
Well, I think I think you're doing a great job, and I think that getting the word out on this podcast also. I mean, you're informing a lot of people as well. So, kudos to you there. So once again, I'm speaking with Bree Bonchay, and her website is FreeFromToxic.com. I'll have that linked up at the show notes page at thetraumatherapistpodcast.com. So how about a go-to book recommendation from you, Bree?
Okay, well, that's easy. So Sandra Brown has a book coming out. I think it's available on pre-order now. I got to review it, and it's a great book. It's her Women Who Love Psychopaths, 3rd edition. Anybody who's interested in this field, working with folks who've been in these types of relationships, I think it's like a go-to guide for any clinician. I also think it's a great book for just anybody who's experienced it or needs some answers and maybe sort of like a compass for healing. And also anybody who's just wanting to have more information so this doesn't happen to them. So
that's Women Who Love Psychopaths.
3rd edition.
3rd edition. Inside the relationships of inevitable harm with psychopaths, sociopaths, and narcissists. Wow, whoa, heavy duty title. Sandra Brown. Okay, and what's the best way for people to get in contact with you, Bree?
Okay, so people can reach me a variety of ways. They can contact me through my blog, which is freefromtoxic.com. They can join my Facebook community. I have Free From Toxic on Facebook. I also have WNAAD if they're interested in helping to raise awareness on Facebook, and also WNAAD.com, my website. So awesome. I'll have those linked up as well. Bree, thank you so much for taking the time to do this and for sharing your story, man. It's awesome. Thanks, Guy. Thanks for having me. All right. Take care. You too. CPTSDFoundation.org provides daily recovery support, live group calls, 365 days a year. All calls are led by trauma-informed advocates, authors, and highly respected practitioners in the field of trauma recovery. CPTSDFoundation.org helps survivors connect with others who've walked through the fire of abuse and are on a path toward healing. After working with thousands of survivors all around the world, they know how to help you escape the shame of abuse by connecting with like-minded individuals so you can finally feel like healing is possible. Stop isolating between therapy appointments. Getting re-traumatized with your current strategy is no longer necessary. Reach out to CPTSD Foundation today and discover the life-changing, daily, trauma-informed peer support you've been waiting for. That's CPTSDFoundation.org. You know how deeply trauma impacts your client's mind, body, and emotions, and how difficult healing can be. You have clients who are constantly and unpredictably triggered by their traumatic experiences, controlled by emotions of shame, anxiety, anger, depression, and fear, and even turning to substance abuse, cutting, and other harmful behaviors to cope. World-renowned expert and author Dr. Janina Fisher's proven approach to complex trauma treatment, which is based on 40-plus years of research and clinical practice, addresses the holistic impact of trauma to effectively heal deep trauma and attachment wounds so clients can break free from the past, feel safe, calm, and thrive in life. If you're ready to become a certified complex trauma treatment professional and master neurobiologically informed treatments that will heal trauma, save marriages and families, and help clients take back their lives, then join my friends over at Pessy and save $500 today by signing up at www.pessy.com/trauma treatment. That's www.pessy, spelled PESI.com/trauma treatment.